All right, let's just jump right in. We talk a lot about competitive advantages, right? Things like tech, or price, or speed. But what if the biggest, most untapped opportunity in business today is something, well, something deeply human? That's what we're going to talk about today, the empathy advantage, and why a real human connection might just be your secret weapon in a totally crowded market.
For the longest time, empathy in the business world got dismissed. It was just a soft skill. Kind of fuzzy, nice to have, but not really essential, right? It couldn't be measured like profits or productivity. But it turns out, decades of research have completely blown that old way of thinking out of the water.
So what are we actually talking about when we say empathy? It's not just about being nice. It's really a three-part thing. First, it's about being willing to share someone else's experience. Second, it's about really trying to understand their version of the world, not just yours. And third, and this is the big one, it's about actually caring for their well-being. When you get all three of those working together, that's where the magic happens.
Okay, that's all great for our personal lives, or maybe even our internal teams. But what does it actually feel like for the person buying your product? For a customer, it's that feeling that a company is genuinely trying to get where they're coming from, to understand their emotional state, especially when things go wrong.
And this, right here, brings us to the core of the issue. There is a massive disconnect. A brand new global survey of almost 12,000 people found this huge gap between the empathy customers are practically begging for and what companies are actually giving them.
So let's start with what people want. How much does empathy really matter when you're deciding where to shop? Well, the answer is a lot. A staggering 79% of people, that's nearly 4 out of every 5, say a brand's ability to show empathy is a real factor in where they choose to spend their money.
And to put that number into perspective, check this out. Customers now say empathy is more important to them than online reviews, and even more important than recommendations from their own friends. I mean, just think about that for a second. A genuine connection with a company can actually matter more than a 5-star rating. That is a huge shift.
And this isn't just about feelings. It hits the bottom line. The survey also found that 61% of customers are actually willing to open up their wallets and pay more to a brand that they feel gets them and treats them with empathy. It has real, tangible value.
But here's the flip side of that coin, and it's a rough one. Even though customers are craving this connection, an almost identical number, 78% of people, do not believe that companies genuinely care about them at all. In fact, more than 40% have straight up left a brand because it failed to show any empathy. And this just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got this huge demand from customers for genuine empathy. And on the other, you have the reality where they feel completely ignored and unheard. This isn't just a small crack in the system. It's a Grand Canyon-sized gap in the customer experience.
Now, it's easy to look at this gap and see failure, but that's the wrong way to look at it. This gap is a massive market inefficiency, and that means it is a huge competitive advantage just sitting there waiting for any company that's willing to step up and actually close it. So the question is, how do you do that?
Well, the first step is to stop thinking about empathy as just a feeling and start treating it like infrastructure. Let's look at the incredible turnaround story of the Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the best hospitals on the planet.
So back in the early 2000s, the CEO, Toby Cosgrove, was giving a talk at Harvard. Afterwards, a student came up to him and said this. She told him her father needed critical heart surgery, and even though the Cleveland Clinic had the best medical outcomes in the world, they chose to go somewhere else, all because of its reputation for having zero empathy. And that one comment just stopped the CEO cold.
Cosgrove realized that being technically brilliant just wasn't enough. So he took immediate, structural action. He created a dedicated Office of Patient Experience. He appointed the world's first ever Chief Experience Officer, and he reorganized the entire hospital, not around doctor specialties, but around the patient's actual journey. They made listening to patients a core part of how they operate.
So the Cleveland Clinic proves that building the infrastructure for empathy is job number one. But that structure is totally empty without people who can actually deliver on that promise. And this leads us to a huge roadblock for a lot of companies. This belief that, you're either born empathetic or you're not.
According to that same survey, nearly half the population, 45% of customers, think empathy is just a fixed personality trait. You've either got it or you don't. And if you believe that, why on earth would you ever invest money in training people to be more empathetic?
Yeah, but the data, it tells a completely different story, emphatically.
Dozens of studies have now confirmed that empathy is not a fixed trait at all. It is a skill. And just like any other skill, it can be learned, it can be practiced, and you can get way better at it with the right training.
Just look at Zurich Insurance Group. They invested a ton in upskilling their people, putting almost a quarter of their entire global workforce through 46,000 hours of empathy training. And the results were totally concrete. They saw a 7-point jump in their Net Promoter Score, which is a huge deal for measuring customer loyalty, and a massive lift in people recommending their brand. The point is, empathy training delivers a real, measurable return on investment.
Okay, so we've talked about infrastructure and skills, but what about technology, right? With AI and chatbots taking over, a lot of people are worried that we're just losing that human touch. But what if we're looking at this whole thing the wrong way? See, the smartest companies aren't choosing between AI and humans. They're building a partnership. They use AI for what it's amazing at, handling simple, routine stuff with incredible speed and efficiency. And that frees up their human agents to do what they do best, navigate the really complex problems and be there for customers in those tough, emotional moments.
A great example is Vodafone's AI assistant, Toby. It handles all the simple questions, but it's also built to detect when a customer is getting frustrated or when an issue gets too complicated. And in that moment, it seamlessly hands the whole conversation over to a trained human, making sure the customer gets exactly the right kind of help right when they need it most.
And this really nails the massive shift that's happening right now. The last 10 years were all about the race for digital convenience, and we pretty much mastered that. But the next decade, that's going to be won by the companies that figure out how to bring back genuine human connection and do it at scale.
So here's the ultimate takeaway. Empathy isn't a soft skill anymore. It's not a nice to have. Winning in this new human-centric world means you have to go beyond just talking about it. And you have to embed empathy deep into your company's infrastructure, its skills, and its technology. It has to become part of your operational DNA.
And that really leaves us with one final question to think about, not just for our businesses, but for all of us. As we go about our day, talking to customers or coworkers or clients, how will our very next interaction work to build a bridge of understanding instead of just another barrier?